every Trump-hating liberal. And 1. We live very privileged lives here in America, but we can't ignore that there are still some pretty terrible things happening. Society is disintegrating at a disturbing rate, and we just can't put it back together as fast as it's falling apart. While many of the rich and famous are doing all they can to add speed to the rate at which America is going to hell in a handbasket, one fiery redhead from Texas is reaching out through her music in hopes people will try to fix our country the old-fashioned way. Via Daily Info 24, Reba McEntire is one of the best country singers known to the music industry. She just released a new song which sends a message to liberals everywhere. "'Cause we're still worth saving, we can't go on like this and live like this, we can't love like this, we gotta give this world back to God," Reba sang in her new song called Back to God. This is an incredibly powerful message that needs to be heard everywhere, now more than ever. We have so much hate in the country because of the last election. Americans are burning flags, dishonoring our military and police officers, rioting in the streets, and wishing death on our newly elected president. Clearly, we do need to get this country back to God. You don't have to be religious to know that our country was much more sane and moral when the majority of its citizens believed that they had a higher power to answer to. Maybe you're not in a place where you raise your hands and pray, maybe you just take a moment of silence to reflect on how we get back to a time when kids could play in the streets and handshakes were as good as contracts. Ignoring the problem won't make it go away, and trusting our fellow man to be good on his own doesn't seem to be working either. Maybe it's time to consider what has changed since the good old days. When something is broke, you send it back to the manufacturer to be fixed. At some point, we will have to realize that we can't fix this, only he can. Source: Daily Info 24. Trump sends feds in to raid in Weisselberg after 2 decades, uncover America's worst nightmare. There's a mysterious hidden enemy compound called Islamberg that's nestled deep within the woods of the Catskill Mountains in New York. The only way to access the 70-acre compound is through primitive dirt roads, where more than 100 enemies live in seclusion away from the prying eyes of curious Americans. For over 2 decades, infidels have been prohibited from entering, as anyone attempting to enter will be greeted by armed enemies patrolling a guard shack at the compound's entry gate. Without access to the compound, there's been no way to confirm rumors about the location being used as a training ground for enemy terrorists. But after an alarming incident involving one of the Islamberg residents, police were finally able to obtain a warrant and raid the place. And what they discovered that these enemies have been quietly plotting for years is nothing short of chilling. For over 2 decades, this cult-like group of Sharia law-following enemies have lived quietly under the guidance of Pakistani Sheikh Said Mubarak Ali Shah Gilani, a radical enemy with known ties to Jamaat al-Fuqara, a terror organization responsible for a long list of terrorist activities around the world, including murders of rival religious figures in the United States. Locals in the area have oftentimes reported the sounds of gunfire and explosions emanating from the compound. But because the enemies weren't necessarily breaking any laws, there was nothing that law enforcement could do except keep a close eye on the place from a distance. But with the recent arrest of Islamberg resident Ramadan Abdullah, who was recently caught trying to steal several cases of ammunition from a local mountain store in the area, authorities finally had their chance to obtain a search warrant for the compound, and what they discovered was nothing short of chilling. Shortly after arresting Ramadan Abdullah for theft, the enemy's answers about why he was stealing ammunition raised suspicion among police, who then decided to obtain a search warrant to investigate their suspicions further. During their raid, they discovered a massive stockpile of illegal weapons throughout the Islamberg location, including 8 assault weapons, 4 loaded handguns, 1 loaded shotgun, 2 rifles, 64 high-capacity ammunition feeding devices, and body armor, including thousands of rounds of .50 caliber ammunition capable of piercing body armor. But illegal cache of weapons seized at the compound was unfortunately just the beginning. After Abdullah's arrest, authorities began looking closer into his background, discovering that the enemy is a longtime associate of the U.S.-based Islamist terrorist organization, Enemies of America, Mo, and was the very same enemy who was arrested back in 1977 after police discovered enough material at his home to build 50 bombs. Abdullah also participated in the armed robbery of a candy store in Brooklyn back in the 70s that resulted in the death of a man. But after serving time and having his sentence drastically reduced, Abdullah had pretty much fallen off the radar of authorities, quietly living on the Islamberg compound and training other terrorists on the use of weapons. His arrest has now validated the fears that New York residents held all along that the compound was in fact location being used to actively train terrorists, where Fox News is now coming forward with other possible rumors of there being a tank on the grounds as well, and that the location was once used to hide Osama bin Laden from authorities. Since Abdullah's arrest, New York State Police Major Jim Barnes said he believes that the enemy terrorist has traveled overseas to promote terrorism. All Abdullah's illegal weapons have since been seized, and Barnes questions exactly what Abdullah's motives were for hoarding such a massive amount of weapons in the first place. It begs the question, what was he doing with all this and what were his intentions down the road? Barnes said. Thankfully, Abdullah is being held without bail at the Broome County Jail. On several occasions, political pundit Dennis Michael Lynch has reported on the alarming things going on in Islamberg, exposing how 22 other training camps within the United States are directly associated with the Mo terror network and Ramadan Abdullah. Below is a chilling mini-documentary he did on Islamberg. Watch for yourself and ask, just what exactly is in that U-Haul truck? It's absolutely ridiculous that enemies in this country are allowed to have their own freaking jihadi compounds, where they're actively training their residents on the necessary tactics to carry out terror attacks. While Americans are protected under the Constitution against illegal searches and seizures, when known freaking terrorists are leading these compounds, it's time to stop letting these enemies hide behind our laws and put them all in Gitmo where they belong. H.T. Dennis Michael Lynch. Obama realizes he's not welcome in America anymore. President Obama has taken a break from hobnobbing with celebrities and once again thrown himself into D.C. politics. The former president headlined a Democratic fundraiser last week that was attended by senior party members. While he was in office, Obama tried to portray himself as an everyman, a guy that you could grab a beer with, but the second that he left office he sloughed off that persona. He's spent the past few months touring the world with a revolving cast of celebrities and staying in ultra-luxurious accommodations. Obama's popularity has swelled slightly after he left office, as people began to forget what a horrendous job he did. However, there are Americans who were never swayed by ex-commander-in-chief's silvery rhetoric. Attorney General Eric Holder and Representative Nancy Pelosi were both present at last week's fundraiser. Democrats hope to rig the upcoming redistricting efforts in their favor. They have to do something desperate if they want to have any hope of winning. It's a sign of how few viable presidential candidates exist among the left that they have to keep trotting out Obama. As Hillary Clinton's defeat amply demonstrated, Obama doesn't have that much influence left with the average American. He told them to vote for Clinton and instead, they voted for President Trump. The Daily Mail reports, the 435 congressional districts that elect lawmakers to the U.S. House of Representatives are redrawn every 10 years following the national census. Local legislatures, and not the federal government or the U.S. Congress, redraw these boundaries. Republicans currently control the legislatures in 32 of the nation's 50 states. If Democrats could redraw congressional districts to suit themselves, they'll have a much easier time winning future elections. Don't be fooled by Obama. He's a masterful speaker in a live setting, but often when you reflect upon his words you find that they have had little bearing on either his actions, or the policies that he proposed while at the White House. Source: Daily